He is just a weak vampire, hunted by the church, and they wanted to brutally execute him. A knight hung him up with his sword, and blamed him for many innocent deaths. To the knights, this situation was nothing more than a game. They intentionally allowed him to run, so the church can gain more popularity among the people. He pulls the sword out of his body, and the knight gives himself the title of the Vampire Slayer. The truth was very different. Our protagonist was not a killer. He was just a weak vampire, who spent his entire life trying to survive. His name was Eugene. For 12 years he hid in the shadows, only drinking the blood of animals. After tasting human blood once, the church branded him a monster. They sent the holy knights to hunt him down. They stated Eugene's existence itself stains the image of the church. Without hesitation, he splits Eugene in half, and everything goes dark. But suddenly Eugene wakes up. His body is completely intact. Confused, he looks around, realizing this was the tent he lived in half a year ago. Somehow he has returned to the past. The place he has returned to was a remote forest near Broaden Village, and it was the place where he hid like a coward. This time he decides to become strong enough, so no one can kill him, because vampires become stronger by absorbing the power contained in blood. The stronger the creature, the greater the power they gain. And inside the forest lives the perfect target, the master of the forest. Without hesitation, Eugene jumps at it. He swings his sword with everything he has. But the moment the blade hits the monster, the sword shatters instantly. The monster throws him away like a broken toy. The difference in strength was overwhelming. He was badly wounded, but he refused to run. He has spent his entire life crawling and hiding just to survive. But this time, he will fight, even if it costs his life. His hair and nails begin to grow as his vampire instincts awaken. His aura begins to rise, because this time there is no next chance. If he loses here, everything ends. With everything he has left, Eugene reaches for the roamer's mana crystal. For a moment, everything becomes silent. Then, an explosion erupts from the water. Flesh scatters into the night sky, and slowly, Eugene walks out of the water. Several days later, Eugene confirms he only needed the master's blood to dominate the forest, but he also absorbed its mana crystal. After absorbing it, Eugene gains a new ability. He can transform his skin into black scales. If the scales block sunlight, he might be able to move during the day. During floods, the wetlands expanded, and the creature appeared attacking them. During that chaos, Eugene drank some of the injured monster's blood, then killed several mercenaries and escaped. But even with new strength, he still cannot defeat Holy Knight Young Dirt. Dirt can track him anywhere, which suggests he possesses a skill that detects monsters or undead. The sun is about to rise, so Eugene leaves before testing the mana crystal. Suddenly, a voice appears. Water begins rising, and the voice thanks Eugene, but declares he must still pay for staining the land with blood. A spirit appears. She introduces herself as Miriam, the guardian of the lake. Then Miriam suddenly asks if Eugene heard her, and calls him a bald vampire. Eugene asks who she is. Miriam is shocked and asks if he truly heard her. Eugene confirms it. Miriam immediately bows and introduces herself as a water spirit. She explains that 15 years ago a crocodile took her territory and forced her to serve it. While talking, Eugene notices one of his tattoos disappearing. Miriam asks about the tattoos. Eugene says he does not know their meaning, and the last thing he remembers is having 10 of them. He cannot remember anything from earlier in his life. Eugene suspects the tattoos might be seals or spells, and one of them may have been released today. He decides to leave and tells Miriam to protect the forest. Miriam complains because it has been a long time since she had someone to talk to. She says very few beings can see spirits anymore. Eugene reminds her she planned to turn the swamp back into a lake. Miriam complains it will take forever to purify the water. She offers Eugene clean water, saying it will improve his complexion. When she starts vomiting water, Eugene tells her to get lost and leaves. Miriam keeps shouting behind him, saying she can make more water by peeing instead. Several days later in Broaden Village, someone reports the red-eyed monster has appeared again. Villagers gather and see piles of meat. They are confused because the monster usually brings animals only once every 2 weeks. For 10 years, a red-eyed monster living near the mountain has occasionally left dead animals for the village and never harmed anyone. Eugene arrives and asks permission to enter the village. The chief agrees. When Eugene first appeared 10 years ago, the villagers feared him, but because he regularly brought animals, they gradually accepted him. The villagers watch nervously as Eugene removes his mask. He says he came to share good news. After living in isolation, his illness has been cured. He says the village helped him a lot, so he wants to repay them. If anything happens, they should call him. The villagers are shocked after seeing his face. They question whether this is really the forest monster, and notice he looks like a half-elf. The village chief is stunned because Eugene always wore a mask. Later, Miriam asks why Eugene keeps giving the villagers animals. She says a vampire should want blood and death. Eugene answers that in the human world, showing one's face is a sign of trust. Miriam asks why he is getting involved with the villagers when he said he would leave soon. Eugene puts his mask back on. He says something will soon happen here, and he cannot just watch. Soon mercenaries will attack the village and kill everyone. They will come searching for a boy and abduct him to the castle of the regional lord Sir Terwin. To remove witnesses, they will slaughter the entire village. If Eugene allows that event to happen in the future, where holy knights swarm his territory, will follow. Miriam is shocked and asks how he knows this. Eugene tells her she will find out soon enough. For now, he must gain the villagers' trust, so he appears harmless. Miriam asks what their connection is to the mercenaries. While moving, she suddenly bumps into something. When she opens her eyes, several mercenaries are already there. They ask Eugene if he belongs to the village. They plan to ambush it. They also notice Eugene is alone and unarmed. One mercenary charges at him. Eugene raises his hand and slices off the man's neck. The others freeze. Eugene intends to gain the villagers' trust, so he will kill every mercenary here. The mercenaries start shouting that Eugene is not human. One of them charges at him. Eugene counters immediately and cuts his neck with his sword. Another mercenary says Eugene is not an ordinary vampire, and they at least need his corpse. Eugene spins his sword, and another mercenary shouts that the vampire's head will be his. Eugene moves first and stabs him in the stomach. Another mercenary rushes in with a sledgehammer and swings it to smash Eugene. Eugene stops the hammer with one hand. Then he splits the mercenary and steps on his head. The sun begins to set. Eugene walks forward while the remaining mercenaries hesitate. The villagers later arrive and see the bodies. The village chief asks Eugene if he did this. Eugene denies it. He says he found the bodies while returning from checking his traps during a hunt. He claims the mercenaries were ambushed on the road to Broaden Village. Eugene points at the supposed culprits. Black wolves. He says there were many of them, and he chased them while they were eating the corpses. Some wolves died, but many escaped and could still be nearby. The chief says black wolves are a nuisance in the area and asks how Eugene killed them alone. The villagers inspect the bodies and shout that there are claw marks from wolves. The chief apologizes to Eugene for doubting him. Eugene asks what will happen to the corpses. The chief says they must bury them in the village. Miriam realizes Eugene lies every time he speaks. The wolves appeared only after he killed the mercenaries. Eugene himself created the claw and bite marks to cover everything. Eugene searches the bodies and takes out a letter. He says he looked for items that could be returned to their families. One of the mercenaries had this letter. The chief opens it and becomes shocked. It carries the seal of Sir Terwin. He immediately asks the villagers where Felid is. They say he is still in the village. The mercenaries came for him. Earlier during the fight, the mercenary leader realizes they cannot escape Eugene. If they run, they will be killed anyway. So he orders everyone to attack together. The leader charges forward, but Eugene punches him. The man flies back and crashes into a tree. He begs Eugene to stop and asks if Eugene had been waiting for them from the beginning. Eugene asks what their job was since the village belongs to him. The man apologizes and says they were not there to hunt vampires. They came to find the bastard son of the Terwin family, who was hiding in the village. Eugene calls it a lie. He asks the real purpose and asks if they plan to erase the entire village. The man panics and explains the truth. They were not hired by the Terwin patriarch. Their clients were Kamara Terwin and Verthel Terwin. They were ordered to kidnap the bastard son due to political conflict among the nobles. They brought many mercenaries in case something went wrong. The man begs Eugene to spare him. Eugene remembers Verthel Terwin, the commander of the vampire hunter squad, and the knight who once harassed him alongside Young Dirt. The village massacre was probably the mercenaries' own decision. The man shouts that he only thought it was a good opportunity. If he had known Eugene was there, he would never have done it. Eugene turns away and tells him to watch out for wolves on his way back. The man thinks Eugene spared him and thanks him. But Eugene suddenly cuts off his head. Miriam is shocked. Eugene says the man knew he was a vampire, so he could not be allowed to live. Wolves nearby begin drooling over the corpse. Back in the village, the villagers question the chief. The chief confirms the mercenaries were guards sent to take Felid to the castle. The villagers say Felid came to the village a year ago after losing his mother. The chief says the guards who were supposed to escort him are now dead, so nothing can be done. Eugene asks if Felid must be taken to the lord's castle. The chief nods. Eugene says the mercenaries may have died to beasts, but he can escort Felid safely through the forest since he knows the woods well. The chief asks if Eugene truly means he will protect Felid. Eugene accepts and says a knight would never refuse a chance to help. Miriam says Eugene has skin made of steel. The villagers are stunned. Eugene then apologizes for introducing himself late. He says his name is Jan Eugene from the Eugene house. Miriam quietly says no one would believe that. The villagers react in shock when they hear the red-eyed monster is actually a noble. Miriam shouts that this lie has gone too far. The villagers begin questioning Eugene, but he explains that due to certain circumstances he cut ties with others and lived alone in the forest. The chief thanks Eugene for helping them and says the village is too poor to reward him properly. Eugene says he only needs rest and asks if he can stay in the village for the night. The chief immediately agrees and invites Eugene to stay at his home. Later, Eugene sits by the window examining his fingers. He tests the skin reinforcement ability he obtained from the master of the forest. When black scales cover his skin, they block sunlight to some extent. That means fewer problems during travel. Miriam complains that Eugene lied about being a knight, even though he cannot read. Eugene says he might be exposed someday, but he will leave before that matters. Miriam asks why he suddenly started making connections in the village and accepting their requests. Before leaving, Eugene explains his plan. Humans trust authority more than words. If someone has status, people reduce 100 lies to 10. This small village is the only place that would accept such a sudden claim. Nobles would never believe it so easily. The chief gives Eugene a written statement explaining the situation, so others will not misunderstand him. He also asks Eugene to take care of Felid. Felid introduces himself and says he looks forward to Eugene's guidance. Eugene responds the same way, already planning to use Felid to help him become a real noble. They leave the village together. While traveling, Eugene asks if the nearby village is called Brahma. Felid checks the signboard and confirms it. Eugene then asks if Felid can read. Felid says his late mother taught him. She never received formal education because of her low status, but someone she loved taught her. Felid later learned that person was Sir Terwin. Miriam tells Eugene to ask Felid to teach him. Eugene asks Felid to teach him how to read and write. Felid becomes nervous because he assumed Eugene already knew. Eugene admits that the title of knight is only for appearance. His family has already fallen, and the only thing that kept him alive was his sword. Felid is shocked. They continue traveling. Eugene intentionally lets Felid doubt him first, so that trust will grow stronger later. Miriam says Eugene's acting is convincing, but warns him not to rely too much on lies. Felid's eyes already show he believes him. Soon after, Felid apologizes. He says he doubted Eugene because people in the village called him a monster rather than a noble. From now on, he will judge Eugene with his own eyes. If Eugene came from a warrior family, it is possible he never studied letters. Felid promises to secretly teach Eugene, so he will not be embarrassed in front of others. Suddenly, an arrow flies toward Felid. Eugene instantly blocks it. Felid falls to the ground and sees several bandits appear. One of them orders them to drop all luggage and empty their pockets, or they will die. Before the bandit finishes speaking, Eugene moves. He cuts the man's head off in one strike. Felid freezes in shock. The gray-haired bandit charges at Eugene, but Eugene cuts him in half. Blood and pieces of his body scatter as he falls. The last bandit panics and tries to run. Eugene throws his sword straight through the man's chest. The bandit collapses. Eugene walks over, pulls the sword out, and says he cannot understand why humans attack those weaker than themselves. He strikes the corpse again, and says that looking weak does not mean someone deserves to be tormented. Then he asks Felid if learning to read will help him understand things like this. Felid stands frozen after watching the entire fight. Eugene tells him he can believe whatever he wants, but promises that not a single drop of blood will ever touch Felid. They enter a village market where merchants are selling goods. Miriam says the place looks interesting. Felid warns Eugene to be careful because merchants here often exploit people. He says the village chief always gets flustered dealing with them. Eugene says caution will not matter until he has money. He suddenly stops at a stall and places black wolf leather on the table, asking the shopkeeper to set a price. The shopkeeper recognizes the leather and notes that black wolf leather is rare, especially in that quantity. But after seeing Eugene's worn clothing, he assumes Eugene is an easy target. He claims the leather is badly damaged and says it is worth only 18 silver coins. Eugene opens his eyes and the shopkeeper notices the red eyes. He quickly changes his tone, saying the leather is rare and that he can raise the price slightly. He offers 23 coins. Eugene stays silent. The shopkeeper becomes more nervous and keeps increasing the price while asking how much Eugene wants. Eventually he offers 30 coins and says he cannot go any higher. Eugene accepts. Later that night, Eugene studies a piece of paper. The writing still looks like worms to him. Felid has taught him the basics, but he still cannot properly read. Miriam says the new clothes suit him and says the quality was worth the money. Eugene replies that the market was more generous than he expected. Miriam remembers how the merchant kept raising the price just from Eugene's gaze. Eugene says he only needed something that blocks sunlight. Miriam says Eugene should enjoy life more. She describes how vampires usually live in luxury with castles, servants, silk robes, and fresh blood like wine. Eugene says Miriam knows a lot for someone who claimed to live only in a swamp. Miriam explains she originally lived in the spirit realm and sometimes heard stories from spirits who had succeeded in the human world. She says Eugene will live at least 200 years unless killed by silver or a stake, so he should study many things, including ancient characters and the imperial language. Eugene asks if Miriam can read. She says no. Eugene asks if she can do anything besides making drinking water. At that moment, Felid returns and apologizes. He nervously asks who Eugene was talking to. Eugene says he was talking to himself and asks about Felid's stomach. Felid apologizes for earlier. While preparing the rabbit, he remembered the fight from the morning and lost his appetite. Felid says he still has stamina and the night is long. He says there is plenty of paper left, so he will teach Eugene as much writing as he wants. They begin studying. Eugene asks if learning letters is normally this easy. Felid says Eugene is learning extremely fast. Felid himself needed months to learn the basics, and most people need about a year. Eugene says that might not be enough. Once they reach their destination, being able to read a little may not be sufficient, since Felid will suddenly become a noble's child. Felid says his mother never explained the details, and he never thought much about it. He says he did not even expect Sir Terwin to accept him. Suddenly a man approaches and greets them. He says his group is having trouble finding a good place to camp. Eugene observes that the men carry proper weapons and armor and maintain formation discipline. The man notices Felid and asks where Eugene's group is heading. Eugene decides not to lie recklessly and answers that they are traveling to Lord Terwin's castle. The man says their mercenary group is also going there and asks to share the campsite. In return, they will offer alcohol, water, and lamb meat. A young mercenary named Rabin interrupts and complains that the captain is offering too much. He rudely says they will share the campsite anyway. Captain Partek apologizes and explains that Rabin recently joined the group and does not know his place yet. He introduces himself and asks Eugene's name. Eugene replies that he is Knight Jan Eugene. Rabin immediately protests. He says Eugene does not look like a knight because he has no horse and no armor. He says he has never heard of the Jan house and accuses Eugene of pretending. Rabin points at Eugene and calls him a fake. Then he pushes Eugene with his finger. Eugene remembers he already told Felid he was a knight, so he cannot change the story now. He realizes the mercenaries approached them for another reason. Whether Eugene is really a knight does not matter to them, but their continued pressure changes the situation. There are not many of them. Eugene decides he can kill them all. He reaches for his sword. Captain Partek suddenly stops Rabin and punches him so hard he crashes into a tree. Partek immediately bows and apologizes to Eugene. Eugene glances at Rabin and says an apology is enough and tells them to take their position. Partek thanks him. Eugene notes that many suspicions will appear in the future. To avoid problems, he decides he must become a real knight as soon as possible. Later, Eugene continues reading while Partek stands beside the unconscious Rabin. Rabin wakes up in shock. Partek calls him a fool and demands to know why he charged at a knight without thinking. Partek slaps him again and says his life was spared. A moment earlier, the entire group almost died because of him. Rabin argues that Eugene was not scary and was only holding a short sword. Partek says Rabin judges only appearances and cannot see ahead. He asks Rabin how much Eugene's robe costs. Partek says that robe alone is worth at least 3 times Rabin's monthly pay. He also points out that Eugene was reading a letter, meaning he is literate. Partek then explains what he noticed earlier. While Rabin was talking, Eugene had one hand hidden in his robe and his left foot slightly drawn back. His balance was set for the arc of a sword strike. If Partek had reacted even a moment slower, Rabin's head would have flown off. Rabin shouts that Partek should have stopped him sooner. Partek explains how dangerous knights are. They are born into old families, train with swords their entire lives, fight monsters in dungeons, and kill enemies on battlefields to earn recognition. Only after years of killing do they receive official titles. Impersonating a knight is a serious crime. If Eugene is real, he is dangerous. If he is fake, someone bold enough to claim the title must still be extremely confident in his swordsmanship. Most swordsmen never become knights. If someone over 20 openly calls himself a knight, his skill is likely very high. Rabin asks if Eugene is stronger than Partek. Partek adds that Eugene said he is heading to Lord Terwin's castle. A newly discovered dungeon may soon open there, so Eugene is likely trying to join that expedition. Since their destination is the same, they will probably meet him again. Nearby, Eugene hears everything with his enhanced hearing. From the conversation, he realizes how much weight the title of knight carries. Eugene wonders why the Terwin family hired weak bandits earlier instead of mercenaries like these or their own soldiers. Eugene then walks toward them. Rabin becomes nervous. Eugene says he heard they are also traveling to Lord Terwin's castle, so they should travel together since their destinations are the same. Partek and Rabin agree. As they continue traveling through the Terwin territory, Eugene is satisfied the mercenaries believe he is a knight. Traveling with them should allow him to gather information. Later, Miriam appears after secretly listening to the mercenaries. She reports 2 important things. Lord Terwin's health is extremely poor, and he could die at any moment. At the same time, a new dungeon was recently discovered in the territory. Clearing the dungeon could bring huge profit, but the Terwin family currently lacks both money and manpower to explore it. Miriam asks what will happen to Felid if Lord Terwin dies soon. Felid might become an orphan again immediately after arriving. Eugene says that is none of his concern. Miriam replies that Felid could easily die at the hands of his brothers. Eugene considers that Lord Terwin probably summoned Felid only because he wanted to see his child before dying. He concludes that both his fate and Felid's fate may change after they arrive. Eventually they reach Rose Castle, Lord Terwin's fortress. Eugene notes the castle is larger than he expected. Miriam says Eugene should rise in rank quickly, so he can live in a castle like that someday. Eugene grabs her and tells her to stop shouting nonsense. A guard approaches and asks their business. Partek greets him and explains that they are a mercenary group sent by the Palin Company. The man introduces himself as Kamara, the eldest son of House Terwin. Kamara confirms the goods behind them and orders them to start unloading. He then notices Eugene and asks why he is standing there. Eugene approaches and introduces himself as a knight and begins to introduce Felid. Before he finishes, another man arrives and asks Kamara what he is doing. He says inspection of outsiders is his responsibility as the one guarding the castle. Eugene recognizes the voice. The man is Knight Verthel Terwin, Kamara's younger brother. He is also the commander of the vampire hunting unit that once discovered Eugene and tortured him. Verthel Terwin arrives and demands to know what Kamara is doing there. Kamara responds that he does not need to report everything he does. Verthel says that is not what he meant. Eugene interrupts and presents a letter from Broadwind's chief, GV. Verthel tries to take the letter, but Eugene pulls it back and hands it to Kamara instead. Kamara reads it and is shocked. The letter states that the mercenaries escorting Felid were ambushed by wolves and all died. Eugene was the one who brought the child safely. Felid nervously bows and introduces himself. Kamara says Felid is their new brother, and that their father has been waiting to see him. Verthel stays silent. Verthel orders a guard to take Felid away, wash him, and dress him in proper clothes. The guard grabs Felid and prepares to leave. Eugene steps forward and stops Verthel. He says they should discuss the reward first, and asks to meet Lord Terwin. Verthel refuses and says their father is very ill. He offers to pay Eugene in gold and tells him to leave. Eugene says he worked hard to bring their brother there. Verthel angrily tells him not to repeat himself. Kamara suddenly agrees with Eugene and says they must introduce their new brother to their father. Verthel argues that their father cannot stay awake for even an hour during the day and cannot meet strangers during that time. Kamara mocks Verthel for trying to control their father's schedule. Verthel becomes more irritated, but Kamara smiles and apologizes to Eugene. Verthel is confused. Kamara says it seems Eugene cannot meet their father because his brother is pretending to be the heir. He pats Eugene's shoulder and tells him to return safely. Kamara then leaves with Felid to show him around the castle. Eugene realizes Verthel never intended to let him meet Lord Terwin. At that moment, a large man arrives carrying several men over his shoulders and calls for Verthel. The man throws the mercenaries on the ground and says they were stealing from villagers and avoiding training. He asks if one should be executed as an example. Verthel becomes nervous and glances at Eugene. The man says he knows they were temporarily hired for the dungeon raid. Verthel stops him and says he will deal with the mercenaries later. Since many people are watching, they should continue the discussion inside. Partek tells Eugene that the man is Sir Galfredic. Eugene asks who that is. Partek explains that Galfredic is a knight with a strong reputation. He recently placed third in a tournament hosted by the Evergrow family after defeating more than 1,000 competitors. Eugene asks why someone like that is here. Partek says it is likely because of the newly discovered dungeon. Successfully opening a dungeon is considered a great achievement for a knight, even far from the capital. Many people die attempting it. Galfredic is probably planning to use the dungeon as a stepping stone to be hired by a larger noble family. Eugene then says his job here is finished and asks Partek if he can become his next client. Later that night, Kamara watches soldiers training in the castle courtyard and decides he must open the dungeon this time. He knows his younger brother Verthel has been openly pursuing the successor position since their father's health declined. Verthel even brought Sir Galfredic through his own connections to clear the dungeon. If Verthel succeeds, everyone will support him as heir. A guard suddenly knocks and reports that Sir Eugene is requesting to see him. Kamara remembers Eugene as the knight who brought Felid and tells the guard to let him in. Eugene enters and Kamara welcomes him. Kamara says Felid is safe and offers Eugene a seat. He also says that once their father wakes up, Eugene will be rewarded for bringing Felid safely. Kamara thanks him again for handing over the letter earlier. Eugene replies that his business was only with the lord of the estate, and he was surprised when someone else interfered. Kamara asks what Eugene wants. Eugene says meeting Lord Terwin would help confirm his identity, but he also wants to offer Kamara something. Eugene asks to be included in the dungeon raid. Kamara laughs and says Eugene is more interesting than he expected. He asks if Eugene really claims to be a knight and mentions hearing that Eugene killed several robbers. Kamara asks why he should allow him to participate. Eugene answers that it is an offer that will not harm Kamara. Kamara asks what he means. Eugene proposes his terms. For helping open the dungeon, he will only take 100 silver coins and half of the loot, excluding the mana stones. Kamara says the offer is good but suspicious. Given the current economic situation, that reward is extremely small. Eugene asks Kamara whether he likes the offer or not. Then he states that he is not the one cornered in this situation. Kamara finds the offer suspicious. The payment is below the usual market rate. Eugene asks a simple question. Does Kamara accept the offer or not? Kamara studies him. Eugene looks like a wandering knight with no noble house backing him, yet he shows no greed for money. Kamara assumes honor comes first for him. Kamara hesitates, thinking deeply. Eugene reminds him that he is not the one in a hurry. The comment hits its mark. Kamara remembers his younger brother and realizes Eugene knows exactly which card to play. Kamara smirks. Eugene is different from the usual knights who rely only on strength. Kamara stands and accepts the proposal, saying he sees no reason to refuse such a decent opportunity. He offers his hand and says he looks forward to working together. Eugene remembers Partek's advice. Mana crystals are difficult to purify and the commission fees are high. Dungeon byproducts, on the other hand, sell at full value and are far more profitable. Partek had told him to request only the byproducts. If Eugene does that, Sir Kamara will have no choice but to accept. Elsewhere, Galfredic casually plays with a knife while Verthel fumes. Verthel is angry that Kamara wants to add a new member to the subjugation party. Galfredic reminds him a dungeon is not a playground. It is a place where only life and death exist. Verthel refuses to accept a half-baked amateur who might slow them down. The knight Kamara recruited inspires no expectations either. Kamara has poor relations with neighboring nobles, and his connections are limited. Verthel leans closer to Galfredic and says if the situation demands it, he wants Galfredic to handle it personally. Galfredik realizes Vertel is pushing the responsibility onto him. At that moment, Kamara arrives, apologizing for the delay. He explains he was briefly speaking with his new knight. Kamara confidently introduces Eugene as the newest member of the subjugation party, along with his mercenary band. Vertel immediately recognizes Eugene as the man from earlier and is shocked to learn he leads mercenaries. Vertel refuses the idea, saying they cannot accept someone whose origins and skills are both unknown. Kamara vouches for Eugene's ability and mentions the bandit group that had been causing trouble at the edge of the territory. Verthel's anger grows as Kamara reveals Eugene wiped them out alone using nothing but a short sword. Galfredik lifts his knife again. Galfredik throws the knife straight at Eugene. Eugene instantly notices and dodges it. Galfredik smirks and stands impressed. He apologizes for the rude greeting but says Eugene looks too sheltered, with unscarred skin and no sunburn. He wants to test Eugene's real ability. They move to the training ground, and word spreads quickly. People gather to watch Galfredik duel the newcomer. Galfredik placed third in the tournament, and is famous for tearing monsters apart with his bare hands. Many spectators already feel sorry for Eugene. Galfredik confidently draws his sword and stares him down. Eugene calmly draws his own blade. The referee signals the start. Their swords collide immediately, and both fighters are pushed apart. Galfredik suddenly disappears from Eugene's sight. The fight intensifies as they exchange blows. Rabin cheers loudly for Eugene, excited to see Galfredik being pushed back. Partek stays calm and explains Galfredik is only testing his opponent. He is deliberately allowing himself to be pushed back. Galfredik continues fighting while analyzing Eugene's style. Eugene's swordsmanship is crude and lacks refined habits. There are no predictable patterns to exploit. But the way he fights feels like someone who grew up surviving in the wild. At that moment, Galfredik realizes something. Eugene being a knight is a lie. Galfredik smiles and points out the obvious. Eugene has never received proper training and relies purely on physical ability. Swordsmanship is not everything for a knight, but a few exchanges are enough to reveal the truth. Eugene attacks. Galfredik jumps back and says if Eugene defeats him, he will drop the argument. They clash again. Their swords collide, and Eugene pushes with all his strength, but his footing slips. Galfredik instantly steps in. Eugene hesitates for a moment, confused, and Galfredik seizes the opening. The strike lands directly on Eugene's face. The blow sends Eugene flying across the ground. Vertel assumes the fight is already over, but Eugene slowly stands back up. Anger flashes across his face as he charges forward again. Galfredik is impressed. Eugene is learning quickly. He dodges Eugene's attacks while carefully watching his movements. Eugene leaps in for another strike. Galfredik counters at the same moment. Their swords collide with such force that both blades shatter. They throw away the remains of their swords and immediately begin fighting with their bare hands. Eugene drives forward aggressively, forcing Galfredik back. Galfredik grows nervous. Eugene's build is smaller than his, yet the strength behind his blows is overwhelming. Galfredik admits it to himself. In raw strength, Eugene completely surpasses him. But Galfredik believes his experience still gives him the advantage. He suddenly locks Eugene's stance, drags him downward, and prepares a punch. Eugene is caught off guard. At the last second, he pushes himself upward, twists Galfredik's arm, and forces him backward. Galfredik is stunned. Eugene's rapid learning and survival instincts are evolving in real time during the fight. Eugene steps forward and throws a straight punch. Galfredik realizes too late. This fight is already lost. The punch crashes into his face and sends him slamming into the wall. His consciousness fades instantly. The entire crowd falls silent in shock. The referee announces the result. The winner is Knight Jan Eugene. The crowd erupts in disbelief and excitement. Rabin proudly shouts to everyone that Eugene is their knight, while Partek watches in confusion. Suddenly, Galfredik's eyes snap open. He stands up and charges straight toward Eugene. Eugene braces himself, confused by the sudden rush. Instead of attacking, Galfredik grabs Eugene's hand and raises it high. He begins applauding the victor. The crowd follows, cheering even louder. Vertel, however, is furious. From that day forward, the way people look at Eugene changes completely. Kamara begins treating him with clear favor. The women in the castle admire him. When Rabin bows respectfully to him, Eugene quietly enjoys the feeling. Then Galfredik suddenly punches Rabin, just to get Eugene's attention. His own face is swollen and bruised, and he admits he could barely sleep at all. He shows Eugene the dark bruises covering his face. Attention toward Eugene keeps growing. Later, Eugene enters a room filled with luxurious food. A servant explains these are Lord Kamara Terwin's orders. Since Eugene must open the dungeon, he needs to eat and rest properly, so the servants have been ordered to manage his meals personally. One servant even recommends a specific wine. Miriam quietly warns that eating all of it might give Eugene a stomachache. Eugene tells the servants to leave. He says he will handle his own meals and asks them to inform Kamara that he prefers being alone. For more than a dozen years, he lived deep in the mountains. Now even those who once doubted him are slowly abandoning their suspicions. This result is exactly what Eugene wanted. Yet even after several days, he still cannot get used to people constantly surrounding him. Eugene jokes that Galfredik must want to get punched again. At that moment, Felid suddenly appears. Everyone around them is shocked. Felid walks straight up to Eugene and calmly asks if he has been well. A man screams as he's beaten. Verthel blames him for failing his job and says Eugene should have been killed in the village. He states that if Eugene had died earlier, he would never have reached Rose Castle. The man begs for forgiveness. Verthel calls the mercenary band useless, wiped out by black wolves, and says Felid couldn't even pass along his request. He grabs the man's chin and questions if his eyes are only for decoration, threatening to gouge them out if they're useless. The guards freeze in fear, realizing he can't openly kill someone who already entered the castle. He lowers the knife and decides on another method, calling it the only option and noting it will dispose of the body cleanly. Felid lies on the ground and slowly opens his eyes. Eugene says Verthel ordered him to enter a dungeon. He already knows it means death. Felid says he came there to die in the dungeon. Eugene asks about the mercenaries attacked by black wolves. Felid confirms they were third-rate mercenaries sent by one of his brothers to stop him from reaching the castle safely. Eugene presents a way to live. He tells Felid to become his servant. Felid is 16 and has completed his coming-of-age ceremony, so he doesn't need a guardian's consent. The choice is his. He can wait to die or struggle until the end. The day of the dungeon opening arrives. Galfredic states no one knows what will appear since it hasn't opened yet. Their plan is to clear a path to the mid-rank area. If a high-rank monster appears, they retreat immediately. After that, they scout for dungeon burrows. A porter thanks them. Another man says he'll pretend to be injured after the low-rank monsters are cleared. He refuses to risk dying just to collect a few byproducts. Someone bumps into him. The man freezes when he sees Verthel searching for Felid. He points him out. Felid is handing Eugene food and telling him to return safely. Verthel shoves the man aside and walks over, furious that Felid is staying close to a lowborn. He orders Felid to shoulder his pack and return to his assigned position. Felid stays silent, which angers Verthel further. Verthel grabs his arm and shouts at him to move. Eugene stops him from touching Felid. He calls Verthel's actions ridiculous, sending a boy with only kitchen knife experience into a dungeon. Verthel pushes Eugene's hand away and claims he's trying to make his younger brother strong. He says Eugene has no right to control him. Eugene says Verthel is the one out of line. He declares Felid became his servant yesterday, and everyone present can confirm it. He states their bond is now stronger than blood. If Verthel touches Felid, he will treat it as a challenge. He tells Verthel to go ahead if he wants to loosen up before entering the dungeon. Verthel shouts, demanding who gave Eugene permission, saying taking in another family's bastard is not simple and will ruin his future. Verthel turns as a man behind him speaks, saying they don't have knights in name only and their leaders are skilled. They bring up last week's duel and admit it will take time to reach that level. Kamara places a hand on Verthel's shoulder and says he has no issue in trusting his brother to Sir Eugene. Felid is 16 and should choose his own path. The weak are prey. Once targeted, escape is difficult. Hiding doesn't save them. If they can't become strong alone, they must form a pack. Kamara tells Felid he will show him his studies. A guard arrives and reports no traces of roamers and no monsters escaping through dungeon burrows. They can proceed with the dungeon opening. The dungeon is opened. Galfredic tells the mercenaries their lives are in their own hands. They prepare to enter. Kamara and Felid see them off, saying they will meet again in 4 days, and wish them safety. Inside the dungeon, the mercenaries cut down low-rank monsters. One cries for help as a monster closes in. Galfredic kills it instantly. The man breathes in relief, but Galfredic scolds him and shoves him back into position. He orders the archers to guard the ceiling and stop anything from breaking their formation. A man on the ground panics, regretting joining the subjugation. He tries to run back toward the entrance, but monsters block the path. He drops to the ground as they step over him. Galfredic explodes in anger, saying he wouldn't have run into monsters if he had gone back properly. He shouts at him to get a grip and declares they're safest only when they stay together. He throws him aside and orders him to raise his sword and return to position. Galfredic watches the mercenaries fight and realizes they're not in good condition since they were gathered in a hurry. This isn't a force meant to subjugate a dungeon. More monsters pour in from the rear. Galfredic decides to switch to a two-pronged formation. Eugene steps forward and takes the rear. Galfredic warns him it's dangerous to go alone. Loud noises erupt from behind. Partek and Galfredic turn in shock as something black flies toward them. It's Eugene's mask. Galfredic rushes in and orders Partek to cover the rear. Galfredic rushes in and freezes at Eugene's speed. The monsters at the crossroad are already dead. Eugene stands there holding a flower and asks if it's valuable. The mercenaries react with excitement. Partek is confused that Eugene doesn't know glowgrass and starts reconsidering his strength. They report the remaining mana crystals have been collected. The mercenaries finish gathering and approach Eugene. He tells them to leave some mana crystals behind. Eugene notices only a few crystals despite many kills. They are blue, different from the one he obtained from the roamer. Miriam says the quality is low and the crystals are small. The size and quality depend on the monster's strength and size. Eugene asks if roamers usually have bigger crystals. Miriam says becoming a roamer doesn't guarantee larger crystals. The alligator Eugene absorbed was large and strong, making it rare, and strong enough to take over her territory. Eugene realizes obtaining that red mana crystal was fortunate. Without higher-level monsters, the dungeon has little value. Galfredic receives word of more monsters and ends the break. He sees the mercenaries exhausted and afraid and orders them back into formation. He declares that he and Eugene will take the front. He says the next enemies will be on a completely different level and places a hand on Eugene's shoulder. Galfredic points ahead and says the monsters that hold power in the dungeon likely use goblins as soldiers. They are about to face intermediate-level enemies. If they eliminate them, high-level monsters will be waiting in the core. After consuming the red mana crystal of the swamp roamer, Eugene gained a useful ability. He considers that consuming another could grant a different one. Eugene says he hears at least 50 footsteps, with 3 heavier ones behind. Galfredic acknowledges it and hands him a halberd. Eugene throws it with force, piercing a monster's chest. The group prepares as Eugene charges forward. Galfredic orders the mercenaries to support him. Eugene strikes the first monster, then leaps and drives his attack into its eye. He steps on its head, severs its fingers, and thrusts his sword into its skull. He drinks its blood. The mercenaries freeze, watching him carve through the enemies. Eugene grips the monster's head and tears it free from the body. They imprint the image of the knight they admired. His actions differ completely from the knights they knew. His style resembles a violent beast. After that, everyone was exhausted and wounded. Some mercenaries died along with the monsters. Galfredic thought most of their combat power had lost the ability to push any further because of this battle. It was not like physical fatigue could have built up already. This had to be mental exhaustion caused by the scene they just witnessed. Galfredic thought they could not advance any more than this. As they had already met the target they set, Galfredic told Eugene to withdraw around there. Eugene was not tired yet. For him, it felt like a waste to turn back because they did not know when the next subjugation would be. Galfredic agreed to advance together when Eugene said if he wanted to go back, Galfredic was free to return first. Then Eugene jumped down, ordering Galfredic to take the lead of the subjugation party and head out of the dungeon. From here on, only Eugene and his mercenaries would proceed. Rabin rushed to go with them. When Galfredic saw the soldiers feeling relieved, he thought that was the reason Eugene chose to be considerate of them. A warm heart that cares for soldiers weaker than himself, hidden behind that sharp exterior. Eugene was a man who made people reconsider what a knight truly was. After that, they moved forward. Rabin was nervous as he did not want to go, but he was still getting swept up in this anyway. Then he fearfully remembered Sir Eugene could take down a troll by himself. Rabin stepped on something. When he looked down, it was a spider. Then he looked up and screamed. It was a cave great spider, a spider-type monster that lives in groups. When Partek said there were too many of them, so they should fall back, it made Eugene kill them even faster. Eugene mentioned these numbers were nothing. Partek ordered Rabin to join Sir Eugene. They kept killing the spiders. Some spiders surrounded Rabin. He fearfully shouted for help. Eugene came and helped him. Rabin was nervous seeing Eugene in that state again. After that, Rabin felt relieved as they finished them all. Rabin suggested Eugene turn back now. He asked the captain, but Partek remained silent. Suddenly, Partek grew nervous. They had to face a high-rank cave great spider, the Lord of Spiders. Partek told Eugene to retreat. At the very least, they should come back with Sir Galfredic. Rabin and Partek were shocked when Eugene told them to withdraw. This one was his prey. Partek understood, and they ran back. Mirian said those brats looked like their instincts had surrendered to the difference in strength between them. Eugene asked Mirian if that lord thing was a roamer on par with the master of the swamp. Mirian denied it, and said at that level, it was even stronger than the master of the swamp. And in that case, its mana crystal should be even bigger. Struggle all you want, roamer. A small spider appeared, and Eugene split it with his finger. The second ability Eugene gained by eating the mana crystal of that dungeon's lord was camouflage. By protecting his skin with the first ability he obtained, skin reinforcement, and using camouflage to reproduce human skin, he was now finally able to stand under the sunlight. Eugene was walking around without his mask now. They were having a party. On the table, girls asked Eugene why he had been wearing that mask all this time just to hide such a beautiful face. Eugene was nervous as the girls were fully impressed by him. Miriam was enjoying it as Eugene was getting drained there. A lady said Eugene was beautiful and asked if his lineage had the blood of an elf. Eugene grew confused. Things had gotten more troublesome. Galfredic realized that made a bit more sense. No wonder Eugene's eyes were sharp even in a pitch-black dungeon, and his ears keen like a wild dog's. Taking his agile movements and the monstrous strength Eugene displayed when he threw the spear into account, Galfredic figured Eugene could not be an ordinary human. To think Eugene actually had elven blood running through his veins. He asked how Eugene managed to hide himself all this time. Eugene said he never tried to hide himself on purpose. The girls were astonished. Galfredic said Eugene said that without changing his expression in the slightest. Eugene thought that if he was ever suspected, he could just use the excuse that there was an elf among his ancestors. The moment the mark disappeared, memories he had never seen before played across his mind. He saw himself, as he was, lying in an unknown place. A soft hand was holding his. Eugene wondered who was the woman in his memories? He was confused if those were even his memories. Eugene was lost in his thoughts. And a call from Galfredic made him focus again. Galfredic was annoyed with Rabin as he heard everything. Rabin went ahead and became nothing but dead weight for Sir Eugene. Rabin nervously said that was only because Sir Eugene wasn't human. Galfredik grabbed Rabin more tightly, clearly not impressed. The only thing Eugene remembered was the name Eugene. But because of what happened this time, he has started to have a certain hunch. If he erases these marks one by one, just like now, he might be able to find out more about himself. Not some falsehood like being a knight or having elven blood, but who Eugene truly was. After that, Terwin said he heard they successfully completed the dungeon subjugation. Galfredik nodded and said it was an honor to meet Lord Terwin. Then he introduced himself as Krema, the third son of Galfredik. Then Eugene also bowed and introduced himself. Terwin said Eugene must have gone through a lot. Then he ordered the guards to hand it over. It was some rolled papers, as Terwin heard Eugene needed a certificate to guarantee his status. Eugene took it and said he was very grateful. Kamara grew worried when Terwin started coughing. Then Terwin told Kamara Verthel's ambitions weigh on his mind. He cannot die in peace. Kamara told him not to worry, and said he will guide this domain safely and properly. Terwin called Kamara his beloved firstborn son, and said a domain is just dust and earth. When Terwin advised Kamara that a lord must look after his people, not his land, and lead them, Terwin passed away right there. People started crying, and Eugene thought whatever kind of Lord Terwin was, many people grieved his death. Eugene looked at Vertel. However, even in front of the same person's passing, some did not share the same sentiment. In the evening, Galfredik apologized for leaving in the middle of the Lord's funeral, and asked if Eugene was really staying there. Eugene said he intended to go into the dungeon one more time, as it would be a waste to leave after they went through the trouble of opening it. Galfredik scratched his head and said if the Count of Evergrow heard of Eugene, he would have liked him very much. Galfredik offered his hand and said it was an honor to cross swords with a strong knight like Eugene. Then Galfredik hoped that next time, they would not meet as enemies. Eugene also gave his hand, and they shook hands. Then Galfredik left. Eugene ordered Partek to prepare for departure. Felid asked if Eugene was really staying there. Partek said Sir Galfredik left on horseback. Then Partek told Rabin, as a rule, knights ride horses. So they were going to the trading company to get a horse for Sir Eugene and sell the monster's byproducts. Felid said as Sir Eugene's retainer, he would do his utmost to assist him. Eugene said he would not need Felid's assistance for the time being. That left Felid confused. After that, Felid was holding a wooden box. He was completely clueless about the situation, just standing there like the box might explain everything. They left for the kingdom of Kaler's greatest commerce city, Marin. Birds were flying as they were on their way. People were shocked to see all dungeon byproducts brought in by a single knight, Sir Eugene. A guy grew nervous as the dungeon opening subjugation was done in the Terwin territory not long ago. Rabin was scolding for their carelessness and Felid was exhausted. Felid wiped his sweat while looking up and thinking of Eugene's talk. Eugene was quietly listening when a man introduced himself as Billmore of the Palin Trading Company. Marin kept talking continuously. Someone crushed the man behind the door while asking about Eugene. Eugene grew confused. Partek whispered in Eugene's ear it could get awkward. This person was a secretary working directly under the deputy manager of this Palin Trading Company. He was someone with more power than Billmore. The man was likely come to snatch his byproducts at a lower price, and if Eugene wanted a stable trade partner, it would be best to proceed very carefully right now. Grail pinched Billmore back and told him not to pointlessly challenge someone he can't possibly beat. There was quite a bit of talk about Eugene all over the harbor. Grail thought that was probably nothing more than an unverified rumor spread to inflate the value of his goods. Grail wanted to sign a contract with Eugene personally. He told Eugene to come with him. Grail thought Eugene was a brat of a knight who only knows brute strength, and he will haul him off and strip him down to the bone. Grail felt pressured when Eugene looked at him. Grail bowed and introduced himself as the secretary to the Palin Trading Company's deputy manager. And this will certainly be a good opportunity for Eugene. Eugene behaved cold. Grail hesitated as he said a chance to sell his byproducts under better terms. Grail grew more afraid when Eugene repeated his words. Grail felt lost and apologized, but Eugene kept looking at him. Afraid, Grail left saying he will come see Eugene again another day. Tears came to Billmore's eyes as Eugene just rejected a contract with the deputy manager on his account, and said he will give Eugene his full and unwavering support from now on. Eugene liked it. Billmore happily asked when will they begin the proceedings. Eugene told him they start right now. On the other side, Grail bowed, and told a girl Eugene was no ordinary man. The girl piped from the window while saying it was fine, because knights often make things difficult for them merchants for the sake of their honor or pride. She smiled as they simply have to make things difficult for them in their own way. The girl ordered Grail to deliver a gift to Sir Eugene. Felid asked if Eugene was telling him to stay there and keep selling the byproducts. Eugene said he brought Billmore back. Felid asked the reason why he has to stay behind this time too. Felid said was it because his skills were still too lacking to follow Eugene, and if that's the case then he'll start training with the sword this instant. Eugene asked him the role of a retainer. Eugene let out a sigh when Felid said it was to support the knight they serve in both battle and daily life. Felid was sad when Eugene said Felid has to support him as his retainer. That was the mission Eugene was assigning to Felid. Felid held it in when Eugene walked away while saying Billmore will teach Felid plenty about business. Felid thought if not for Sir Eugene, he would have died a long time ago. Throwing a tantrum over something like this would just be disgraceful. Felid was amazed when Eugene said once they've saved up some funds he will consider teaching Felid the sword. And someday Felid will have to support his battles as a retainer too. Felid was shocked, then he happily said he will follow Eugene's orders. At the evening, in the market, Eugene said money really disappears this fast. Miriam held the purse, saying this was so thin that even her heart feels hollow now. Eugene saw the plate armor. Partek was amazed to see it, as it was a true dream for every knight. Even fairly wealthy knights often pass this kind of armor down through generations. Suddenly Rabin rushed towards them. While informing Eugene, a huge roamer horde has appeared just outside Marin. The roamers from the forest east of Marin were trying to push into the city, and the local Marin guilds were barely holding them back right now. Partek said they should participate in this subjugation. When Eugene asked the reason why should he, Felid moved and said unlike dungeons that have an owner, there were no commission fees for roamer hunts. And this place was Marin, the merchant city, overflowing with capital. It was the perfect location to sell monster byproducts and loot at high prices with no transport costs. It was a huge pile of money. Eugene said there was no reason to hesitate. Everyone was shocked when someone arrived. It was Grail with a horse. Then Grail said the deputy manager sent a warhorse as a gift. The horse had a glossy black mane as smooth as silk, muscles tightly woven as if a god had sculpted them. When Eugene doubted the deputy manager was giving him this, Grail stepped back as there was that look in his eyes again. Eugene looked at him terrifyingly. Then Grail said it is just a small token of appreciation. Eugene mounted the horse and ordered Grail to tell her he is grateful. Then they left to rake in some money. Rabin was nervous as Eugene already went ahead. Partek ordered to run after him. Grail fell silent. Marin City, Eastern Outer Forest. They turned. A horse was heading towards them, and Eugene cut off its head. Miriam said if they can already see the roamers from there, then this really was on a huge scale. Most of the Marin Guild members who were supposedly holding the line up ahead were already dead. That was good news for Eugene. Eugene does not like sharing loot after all. Eugene moved forward as the sun was shining. Eugene arrived at the battlefield where mercenaries were fighting the monsters. A knight was surrounded by monsters. The monsters were ready to eat him. Suddenly he lost his balance on the horse and fell down. The horse ran away. The knight pushed himself up as he was the Knight of Justice Madrika. He got nervous when he saw a monster stepping down. Then he fearfully looked up at the terrifying monsters. He shouted help. He fell silent when someone killed a monster from a mile away. It was Eugene. As he moved forward, he kept killing the monsters. Seeing all this, the knight grew nervous. Eugene killed every monster around him. The knight asked Eugene his name, but Eugene raised his sword. The knight was shocked when Eugene's sword hit a monster behind him. The knight was totally amazed. Eugene said it would have been pointless if the knight died there. The knight was ready to fight the monsters and said when they return he will ask for Eugene's name again. After that, the knight started telling his people hundreds of goblins rushed over to this great city of merchants Marin like a swarm of ants. The knight turned while saying that knight slayed the goblins without mercy. In the end, they were able to secure victory and protect Marin. A guy asked who the knight was. The knight pointed and said his name is Jan Eugene. After hearing the name, the people grew crazy and started cheering for Eugene. A man was looking from the glass as the entire city was chanting the name of that knight. It was the current mayor of Marin, ex-representative of the Palin Trading Company, Louis Palin. Louis asked Pricella if they should leave him be. Pricella nodded, as everything will be under control. Pricella hoped Sir Eugene becomes even more reputable. After all, the higher he soars, the worse the fear of the fall gets. Pricella asked Louis if he knew the child who has been supplying the byproducts. From what Pricella had investigated, the child was a hidden illegitimate child of the Turwin family. Louis said they do not know what Sir Eugene was thinking, but he was trying to secure a huge fund through business. Pricella said if they can secure them, they might be able to build a relationship with the future head of the Turwin family. Louis said Pricella intend to buy off a knight who is sponsoring an illegitimate child. Louis said he will also have to send Sir Eugene a gift. Pricella thanked him and said she will put Louis in as a referral. At night, Pricella took the cup while thinking those who were thirsty will seek the water's edge to drink. As a merchant, there was only one thing she has to do: to dig a well before the right person is thirsty. Someone stepped in as Pricella said she will wait until he drinks the water she dug out. Eugene said he was there to give his thanks and asked if she was Pricella. Pricella offered Eugene to take a seat. Pricella was thinking that Eugene was a beautiful individual, also a terrifying knight capable of decapitating a troll with his bare hands. Pricella smiled and said the armor that their mayor gifted Eugene suits him well. It was made from a special steel forged by mixing Elsic iron with ogre bones, giving it a hardness even a dragon's fangs cannot easily pierce. Pricella asked how it was. Eugene said he can count on its sturdiness in the next dungeon subjugation. Eugene was grateful to Pricella for providing them with great lodging and food. Eugene stood up, but Pricella said listen. Pricella was shocked because Eugene was leaving suddenly. Eugene said his contract was only limited to the byproducts from the dungeon this time. Pricella angrily bit her lips when Eugene said he'll focus on collecting mana crystals. When Eugene was leaving, Pricella shouted and made Eugene turn. Then Pricella said, "We need to talk." Eugene was confused. Then Pricella said, "Don't play dumb." They had gifted him the most expensive full-plate armor in Marin and a warhorse with a pedigree. The byproducts Eugene sold to the company were enough. Even enough to pay for half the services they provided. Pricella said everything has a cost. Then Pricella asked him, "Do you care if the people of Marin, who were praising him, find out Eugene was a shameless knight who knows no honor?" Pricella said Eugene was walking away after taking everything from her. Eugene fell silent, as he found it ridiculous. Then Pricella dumped unwanted gifts on Eugene, and now Pricella demanded payment for those gifts. Eugene asked if a mere merchant was trying to threaten him. It made Pricella nervous. And Rabin smirked. Eugene has already made a contract with Palin Trading Company through Billmore. So, he couldn't care less what the people of Marin say about him. As Pricella said, everything has a price. Eugene told her to run her mouth all she likes. Eugene looked at Pricella and said she'll find out. And it made her afraid. From where Eugene stood, Palin was colluding with the city of Marin to persecute the knight who saved the city. Eugene left while saying if this is how things go, there won't be a single knight willing to step forward for Marin. Partek turned and said this was truly unfortunate. Pricella felt lost when Partek said they could certainly have built a good relationship. She was quietly watching them, and Billmore called her. Someone asked Eugene to wait. It was Pricella, and she bowed as she had been discourteous, and deeply apologized. Pricella wished to start this relationship over from the beginning. They'll keep Eugene existing contract with Billmore, but Pricella wanted to add some clauses to the agreement. Pricella thought she had seen more than enough knights who wag their tails the moment they dangle expensive patronage in front of them. But this one was different. Pricella realized he's too dangerous to toy with. Pricella was nervous. But suddenly her expression changed, as Eugene said he'll at least hear her out. Make it tempting. Pricella nervously thanked him. Miriam was amazed to see the armor. She found Eugene the coolest in the whole world. Partek took out a paper and said the Palin Trading Company's business scale was so large that it can't be ignored. They have hundreds of branches all across the Roman Empire with Marin as their main base. They primarily trade vigorously with noble houses that own local magic domains. It was far better than receiving an appointment from a noble house. Partek said it was a brilliant push and pull on Eugene's part. Eugene only said it as he was annoyed. They fell silent when someone arrived. It was Verthel with a big, overconfident man. Miriam was shocked, and when Eugene looked down, he saw Kamara waving. Eugene went down from the horse. And Kamara said Eugene has changed quite a bit in such a short time. Eugene asked about the situation. Aside, Kamara said instead of having his spirit broken, Verthel went and hired new mercenaries again. The mercenary band he hired to bring Felid here last were a pretty nasty bunch. But the mercenaries he's brought this time give off a similar sort of feeling. Eugene silently looked at them. Kamara told Eugene to serve as commander of this dungeon subjugation party. The big man spat on the ground and said, "If you die, I become commander?" Kamara was confused. The big man stood up and came near to Eugene, saying in a dungeon, human life becomes as cheap as a fly's. Eugene was silent, but the big man was disgustingly looking at him. Everyone was shocked when Eugene said, "If I die, let Baldy play commander." Miriam pointed, and Eugene knew this was one of Verthel's little tricks, planning to use the mercenaries to get rid of Eugene inside the dungeon. They entered the dungeon as it might be fun. Miriam was curious. After that, Eugene started killing the monsters. Then he spun his sword and dug it into a monster behind him, and took his sword out. After seeing this, the big guy thought Eugene's reputation wasn't just empty bragging. He stands at the very front, taking on 100 men's worth of work all by himself. The big man has to watch carefully for a good opening. Just one chance to get this poison-coated sword to at least graze that infuriating face. Eugene informed them there were only mid-rank monsters up ahead, and only those confident they can keep up were to follow. The big guy followed him, as this was their chance. And Partek said they'll stay there and wait for a bit. It seemed like Sir Eugene has a different idea in mind. Then went forward. And Eugene thought last time he was together with Sir Galfredic. It was a lot less entertaining without him. Eugene thought Galfredic was an excellent leader. He raised fallen morale at just the right moments. With him, he might have been able to clear this dungeon safely. Eugene looked at them curiously, thinking about how Galfredic would handle this situation. The mercenaries stopped when Eugene said they finally had decided to drop the half-hearted act. Miriam started releasing water, as if they were that eager to die. Everyone grew nervous. Miriam released a water ball, and it blew out their fire. They were afraid, as Eugene could use magic too. They grew frantic and started shouting to relight the torches. Only Eugene's eyes were shining terrifyingly. Eugene started killing them, and the big man realized they were under attack. Then he ordered them to attack too. He tried to relight with stones, as it actually turned into a situation that made it easier for Eugene to rampage alone. He continuously tried to light it up. The big man nervously fell silent. Then he turned in fear, as it was so quiet. Eugene stepped in and asked if he needed fire. The big man was shocked. Eugene took the stones, saying if the big man was having trouble breathing, he would help him. When Eugene lit it up, there was a high-level monster in front of them. Eugene asked the big man if he saw who was hunting, and who was being hunted. Eugene's vampire teeth grew as the big man was looking at the monster. Then Eugene opened his mouth to bite the big man. It was pouring. Someone stepped in. It was Kamara, hurrying and calling for Eugene. Eugene stood quietly. He turned his eyes as Kamara and Verthel entered. Verthel was confused seeing the situation. Eugene pushed the big man in front of them to hear it directly from the person involved. They grew nervous seeing Maverick. He fearfully admitted that he had tried to kill Eugene, on Verthel Terwin's orders. Verthel nervously said Maverick was spouting nonsense because he had lost it. Kamara scolded Verthel. But Verthel kept insisting it was a lie and told Maverick to explain himself properly. Maverick was completely lost. He had dared to raise his hand against his lord. He ran toward the window, saying trash like him deserved to die. Then he jumped. Kamara rushed to look. People were horrified as Maverick fell onto the statue's sword and died. Verthel then said Maverick had clearly gone mad and that his ravings were too strange to believe. What Kamara found stranger was that Verthel seemed relieved someone had died. Verthel went nervously silent. He panicked and asked Eugene if he had no pride as a knight. Eugene asked Verthel if he was truly innocent. Still, Verthel refused to accept his crime. Then Eugene reached into his armor and demanded a trial by combat against Verthel, upon the truth. Verthel grew angry. After that, everyone became aware of the combat. The target was the person the Lord had recently hired, Jan Eugene. As the combat began, Kamara was worried. Since their claims sharply conflicted, they intended to let a duel decide the truth. Then Verthel rushed to attack. Eugene was ready. Their swords clashed. Verthel raised his sword, but Eugene stopped his attack. Eugene went silent as he remembered how Verthel had once chased him. He openly mentioned it. Verthel was confused. Eugene attacked. Verthel couldn't hold on. The sword slipped from his hand and he fell. Eugene told him in disgust to pick it up. Verthel was helpless. Kamara was troubled. Verthel's swordsmanship was not poor. But this time, even someone ignorant of the sword could see it. Jan Eugene was overwhelmingly stronger than Verthel. Then Eugene cut his hand. Kamara shouted to stop. Eugene gave him a cold look. Kamara grew nervous as Eugene told him to step aside. Kamara declared Eugene's victory since Verthel was no longer capable of fighting. But Verthel still stood to fight. Kamara told him to stop. Verthel refused when Kamara said that as a knight, he should acknowledge his crimes and repent in prison. Then Verthel rushed at Eugene, gripping his sword. Full of anger, Verthel said that if it weren't for Eugene, if Eugene had never appeared in his life, he would never have had to suffer this humiliation. A blue ray moved. He looked down and lowered his sword. Kamara was shocked. Verthel couldn't move his body. He should have taken the last chance Kamara gave him. Eugene had cut Verthel's head off. Everyone fell silent. Then Eugene left. Kamara couldn't say anything. After that, birds were flying. Inside the castle, Eugene was walking. Miriam said Eugene had only used Verthel to force a confession before tossing him aside. Eugene replied that Verthel had such a weak mind. Using him as expendable bait to force a trial by duel was the most appropriate use for him. And he couldn't let someone go after they had bared their fangs at him. Miriam called Eugene heartless, but added that a vampire should command countless slaves. Eugene raised his hand to open the door. As it opened, he heard Pricella talking about Galfredic. They saw Eugene. Billmore went to welcome him, but Eugene grabbed his collar and asked what had happened to Galfredic. Pricella fell silent. They quickly explained. 2 weeks ago, Sir Galfredic had taken part in the labyrinth subjugation in Count Evergrove's domain. Galfredic had gone missing alone inside that labyrinth. They had thoroughly searched. Eugene pushed the door open forcefully. A man upstairs welcomed him, having heard much about him already. Eugene bowed and thanked Jevin for the warm reception, but noted the urgency of the situation. Jevin invited him further inside. He was the eldest son of House Evergrove. Eugene then learned that Galfredic had entered the upper levels on his own initiative, something that caught him off guard. Jevin explained that the upper levels Galfredic had entered were home to the so-called Master of the Labyrinth, a being that rules over the entire labyrinth. The revelation left Eugene confused. Another man added that Galfredic had caused trouble for many. Jevin introduced him as their house's territorial knight, Sir Lugates, the one who had led the subjugation alongside Sir Galfredic. Lugates noted an amusing fact they shared. He, too, had beaten Galfredic in a tournament. Eugene found it irrelevant. Jevin stepped toward them and apologized to Eugene for the situation. Eugene grew confused when Jevin revealed that he and Galfredic were bound to each other. Eugene nodded, clueless. Sitting across from him, Jevin told Eugene to listen. They would give him their full support. For the past 100 years, anyone missing in the subjugate for over a month was officially declared dead. They had 1 week left to find Galfredic. Eugene was shocked when Jevin added that after that, there would be no hope. Eugene stood up to leave at once, but Jevin stopped him. Within 3 days, Jevin would have a subjugation party assembled with Lugates. Eugene watched him quietly as Jevin told him to rest until then. As Eugene turned to leave, he thanked Jevin. Jevin mentioned they had recently hired a mage and would assign him to Eugene as additional support. Eugene walked through the market while Miriam kept talking beside him. His thoughts drifted to Galfredic. He remembered Galfredic telling him he had received an appointment from the Count of Evergrove and had asked Eugene to come along. Eugene couldn't understand why they had changed their minds so suddenly. He knew Galfredic wasn't greedy. A man's shout broke through his thoughts. Eugene turned. An old man stood in the crowd, announcing a prophecy. On the day a red shadow falls upon the moon, the goddess of victory will grow wrathful and descend to wipe out the land. People began rushing as word spread that the calamity had already begun. Miriam muttered that the old man was talking about the green onion dude. The old man shouted that they must sprinkle the fresh blood of a calf before the gate, and with the remaining meat, offer a ritual feast. Only then would the Messiah descend. People listened nervously. Eugene could tell this was no ordinary town. A boy handed Eugene a flyer marked with an eye. Eugene took it and saw images of wild beasts that had died near the labyrinth during earthquakes. He stared at it, lost in thought. A girl carrying a stick was heading toward them as Eugene told Miriam they would head for the labyrinth immediately. The girl overheard. As she passed Eugene, she remarked that she never expected to see a vampire there. That caught his attention. She added that vampires had been nearly wiped out by the Holy Knights. Yet there Eugene was, walking in broad daylight with such brazenness. Eugene grabbed her collar. The old man was still shouting in the background. Eugene shoved her against the wall and demanded to know who she was, stunned by how quickly she had recognized him. She didn't answer. He pressed harder, her neck close to the breaking point. Finally, she gasped that she was a blood shadow. Eugene was confused. The name sounded familiar to Miriam. She cried out and rushed toward Eugene to stop him. Eugene glanced at Miriam and understood. The girl was a mage from the Blood Shadow School. He released her neck, but she had already fainted. She then asked Eugene why he had attacked without a word. Miriam was amazed when Eugene apologized. The mage then introduced herself properly. Cyranor Ramari of the Blood Shadow School, which serves vampires as retainers. It was an honor, she said, to meet a member of the dark race in person. Eugene then realized she was the mage Jevon had mentioned. Deep inside, Eugene grew angry when Ramari said the same thing about his relationship with Galfredic. Ramari had also taken part in the subjugation party the day Galfredic disappeared. Eugene, shaken, asked her to explain what had happened. Ramari agreed. She had needed monster byproducts at the time, so she personally applied for the Evergrow Labyrinth subjugation. The labyrinth was notorious for its difficulty, but having been discovered 100 years prior, every area beyond the upper levels had already been fully cleared. Then, deep inside, a tremendous roar shook the entire labyrinth. The ground beneath her collapsed. She was about to fall when Galfredic grabbed her and plunged into the depths below in her place. Ramari barely managed to escape. Everyone was convinced the earthquake had occurred because Galfredic had opened the door to the upper levels. Because he had saved her life, she felt she owed Eugene the truth of what really happened. And she never imagined Eugene would turn out to be a vampire. Eugene grew confused. He thought Jevon had lied to him. He fell silent as Ramari stood and told him there was something else. Something she had seen down in the depths where Galfredic had fallen. An enormous eye drawn on the ground. Eugene asked about it. Ramari told him it was the same eye printed on the flyer a boy had recently handed him. Somewhere, a cult was gathered and tortured dead humans were lying down, while the cult's leader was smiling. With all hired mercenaries and Templars assembled, Lugates asked Eugene if he was excited to meet his close friend again. Eugene replied that there was no need to transport a corpse. Galfredic was not the sort to die easily. Lugates laughed hard. He had wanted to enter this labyrinth for a long time, but now, knowing Galfredic's disappearance was no accident, he needed to watch this man closely. Galfredic had already endured 3 weeks. Another 3 days wouldn't kill him. His unease grew when a new group arrived. Templars from a monastery under House Evergrow. Their fighting spirit was unsettling. Lugates smirked and suggested Eugene could always change his class to Holy Knight later. Eugene fell silent. He pulled Partek aside and warned him not to let his guard down. Miriam marveled at the place, noting the overwhelming water energy. Watching the Templars, Eugene thought. Unlike a dungeon, this was an artificial space deliberately arranged. Survival, at bare minimum, was possible here. Lugates approached and remarked that it was certainly a fitting place for evil things to lurk. Eugene's skills were exceptional. Eugene asked about the exact spot where Sir Galfredic had disappeared. Lugates told him not to be impatient. Hadn't Eugene said he trusted Galfredic? Then he should trust Lugates now. House Evergrow had fully mapped the labyrinth's traps. Eugene countered that there were still casualties every time. Lugates replied with disgust. They were offerings. Hope would carry the rest through. Eugene was stunned. The place began to shake. As the earthquake struck, Lugates started warning the Templars. Something caught Eugene's eye. The walls were constantly shifting their structure. It was the shortcut where the upper levels lay. Ramari shouted, but Eugene kept his eyes on Lugates. Eugene asked, "Where exactly is this shortcut?" As the walls closed in, Lugates told him the shortcut was right where Eugene was standing. The walls shifted. Eugene and Ramari looked around, confused, but Eugene quickly realized the earthquake was not a natural occurrence. Ramari nervously called out to Eugene. He turned and froze. A wounded Galfredic lay before him, bound with ropes. Eugene rushed to his side and checked his pulse. He determined that Galfredic could be saved if they got him out, and treated him immediately. Miriam stepped forward urgently, expressing that something deep below felt deeply wrong. Suddenly, waves of air and dust swept through. They froze. A red light appeared. Then a massive skull-like head with shining eyes and a long tail emerged. A great monster rose before them. Ramari tensed at the sight of the Minotaur, and Eugene ordered her to protect Galfredic. Eugene charged. He leapt forward and raised his sword. The Minotaur opened its mouth and hurled both Eugene and Romari back. Its energy surged as it raised its sword. Eugene barely had time to react. The Minotaur struck, crushing the wall where Galfretic was tied. Galfretic collapsed to the ground. Eugene was shocked. He hurriedly jumped, but Galfretic kept falling. Eugene desperately wanted to save him. Romari stopped him with her magic. Eugene looked at her furiously. Romari created a protective layer and told Eugene that a Minotaur was considered strong even among high-rank monsters. Even a vampire could die to one. Eugene grew more furious. Romari fell silent as Eugene pointed his sword at her. Eugene furiously told her she had overstepped her bounds. Romari apologized, saying she couldn't just stand by and watch a vampire charge headfirst to his death. Eugene kept looking at her furiously as Romari added that if he truly wished to save Galfretic, he needed to assess the situation once calmer. Romari was angered by the Minotaur's size. Eugene felt bad, and the walls started opening. They turned. Lugates entered, saying he had underestimated Romari. He hadn't thought she could use earth magic. Lugates said Romari didn't want to save Galfretic, but Romari insisted it all happened too fast. Eugene grabbed Lugates by the neck. It was him who had reduced Galfretic to that state. Lugates said he only brought Eugene to Galfretic because Eugene looked desperate to see him. He raised his hand, remarking that Eugene was far ruder than the rumors suggested. Eugene, startled by the energy radiating from Lugates, noticed something. He seized Lugates' hand and pulled back his sleeve. Romari tensed. That brute strength wasn't Lugates' own. Romari explained that the magic formula was originally used to transfer power between humans. But once people began inheriting the power of non-human beings, it was completely banned. The words enraged Lugates. He declared that they were chosen ones, that when despair descended upon the world, they would be the ones God selected to survive. He turned to Eugene. Eugene said flatly that Lugates had beaten Galfretic by borrowing someone else's strength, then boasted about it, and that he would make sure Lugates understood exactly where he truly stood. Lugates froze as Eugene released his power. The force of it overwhelmed them both. Romari stood in stunned silence, shaken by the sheer magnitude of what he had just witnessed. Lugates pressed his hand. He was not the only one who had been hiding his strength. He attacked Eugene with his elbow, then released his power on him, throwing him back. Lugates had no intention of holding back. Romari screamed as they fell again. Lugates had already told Eugene that every trap in the labyrinth had been figured out. Lugates told them to fall nicely to their death. Eugene called Romari as Lugates jumped up. He watched them falling. Eugene raised his sword. Lugates looked at him. Eugene's sword scratched Lugates' face. Lugates looked at it. As the sword was broken, what Eugene had shown him went far beyond what he had imagined. Lugates thought using Galfretic as bait instead of killing him outright really was the right choice. He smirked. The final sacrifice would be offered. Romari could no longer form her magic circle, and they fell. Eugene headed forward. Romari was nervous. She was stuck between the broken wall. Romari walked after Eugene. She stepped in because it felt too ominous. She let out a sigh. Eugene was carrying Galfretic. Romari grew confused when Eugene asked her to save Galfretic. Eugene looked at her. Romari was helpless. She came closer and agreed. Mirian informed Eugene there was no exit, no walls to tunnel through either. This was the farthest end of the labyrinth, a sealed boss room. Mirian had wanted to tell him earlier. There was so much water energy there she thought she could do something, but even as a water spirit, she couldn't control any of it, especially that pool of blood, which felt out of place. Eugene looked up and saw the eyes. Eugene asked Mirian why she couldn't control this. Mirian can only control the blood of the dead. Something pushed itself upright. Eugene stared at it. Romari froze in shock, mid-healing Galfretic. Eugene ordered Mirian to find them a way out. As the monster advanced, Eugene reached for his weapon. He glanced back. Galfretic still couldn't move. He decided to keep the monster occupied and charged at it. The monster raised its hand and struck. Eugene barely escaped and looked at its feet. His sword shattered. Before he could process it, the monster opened its mouth and spat acid at him. It hit his clothes. He was caught off guard, then hurled back, catching himself against a broken wall. He realized a normal sword couldn't even scratch it. He began forging a sword using his own power, then readied himself to attack again. Eugene locked eyes with it and lunged. He pulled back, dodging each strike. It wasn't enough. He was caught again. The monster struck, and Eugene hit the ground hard. Then it hurled something at him. Romari grew frantic, calling out to Galfretic as Eugene's situation worsened. Eugene realized Romari had been telling the truth. Wounded, he understood. High-rank monsters were on a completely different level. Helpless, he could do nothing as the monster unleashed its power. The force was staggering. It melted his armor clean off. Romari watched on, deeply worried. Eugene began losing consciousness, overcome by a familiar helplessness. The monster raised its hand over him. He couldn't move. It drove the blade in. Eugene fell. He could barely open his eyes, searching for a reason. Galfretic lay still, then slowly opened his eyes. He was stunned. Romari was nervous. This was exactly why she had warned Eugene. Even if he was a vampire, there was no way he could defeat something like that. She looked up anxiously. There was nowhere to run. She thought she was going to die here. She closed her eyes and apologized to herself. feeling she hadn't been a good enough disciple. She was startled when Galfredik spoke. Galfredik said he had involved Eugene in this too. Ramari wanted to run, but Galfredik refused. Galfredik revealed that Lugates had used her as bait to get to Eugene. He had been after Sir Eugene from the very start. Galfredik walked toward Eugene, saying this was all his fault for being weak. He thought it was a relationship that could have ended as quickly as it began, but Eugene's inner and physical strength had instantly charmed him. He hadn't wanted to let go of the opportunity. He had wanted to become someone strong enough to stand by Eugene's side. The monster raised its hand to attack. It was all over. Galfredik grabbed Ramari by the collar, threw her out of the way, and apologized to Eugene. Eugene watched as Galfredik said that if he were to reincarnate, he hoped to be reborn as a knight who served Eugene. Witnessing it all, Eugene began to regain consciousness. Filled with rage, his vampire teeth emerged. Ramari was shocked as a red light erupted from below. Eugene grabbed the wall and crushed it. His body began to change. His eyes turned black. When the monster attacked, Eugene dodged instantly and cut its hand. The monster caught him. Eugene stood on the pillar as blood began rising into the air. He was turning dangerous. Ramari was shocked by the change. The monster attacked again, but Eugene released more power. Ramari ran as the blood puddles in the surroundings reacted to Eugene. She was shaken, having just witnessed something historic. Eugene raised his hand, gathered the energy, and hurled it at the monster. Eyes that were unconscious gained consciousness. Ramari watched in confusion as the blood puddles suddenly grew much shallower. The monster's head flew into the air, yet it was healing too fast through magic. Ramari stood nervous as the monster's critical injuries closed. The labyrinth was using blood as an ingredient to heal it. Eugene looked at the monster and drove his kick into its eye. Ramari was shocked to see blood pouring from the eye. Eugene returned to the pillar, leapt off, and dove beneath the eye, striking it continuously. Eugene knew it now. The true owner of this labyrinth was not the Minotaur. The hundreds of missing people, drawn into the labyrinth built for long-term human survival, had essentially been consumed by it. The labyrinth itself was a god, one that those men had been worshipping and offering sacrifices to. The scene shifted. The Templars knelt in prayer before the Messiah, calling for it to come forth and deliver its reign of salvation and mercy. Eugene prepared his attack. Lugates watched with satisfaction, craving the god's wrath. The eye had opened. Now was the time for it to hear their prayers. Every blood puddle was absorbed. Energy pulsed around the eye as it activated, and the monster's body began to change. Ramari was thrown to the ground as the monster took flight, surging upward and tearing through the wall. Her nerves frayed. A high-ranking monster had escaped the dungeon, and there was a town nearby. She had no idea what to do. Miriam returned, having found an exit, only to freeze at the sight of one already there. She looked around at the collapsing space, then went rigid when she spotted Eugene. The blood swords were lodged deep in Galfredik's body. Eugene walked toward him, reached out, and touched his hair. Eugene's expression softened. He wiped the tears from Galfredik's face. Ramari had never seen a vampire conceal its nature so completely, hiding behind the guise of a knight, forging a genuine bond with humans. Eugene parted his lips, then bit into Galfredik's neck. The monster flew over the forest, then descended as a town came into view. It let out a piercing scream. The moon turned red as people wandered through the streets. The scene shifted. Ramari asked Eugene if he had ever heard of origin vampires, the highest-ranked and most noble of their kind. Eugene possessed the blood of an origin vampire. Ramari added that an origin could resurrect someone who had recently died and make them their subordinate. Eugene's gaze fell on Galfredik. He knew the process. Bite the target's neck, then give them his own blood. He recalled the last time he had done it. His mind hadn't been able to handle it. Ramari acknowledged that most humans reacted that way, but suggested it might be different for Sir Galfredik. According to their master, a person with sufficient mental fortitude who took in an origin's blood could retain both their sanity and the abilities they had as a human. The problem was that Galfredik was an honorable knight. He might consider it an insult. If so, he could turn on them. Eugene said nothing. He had never told Galfredik what he was. There was no way to know how he felt about vampires. He turned their shared moments over in his mind, then went still. There was no other way. He would simply have to ask him. Eugene bit down, and blood began to pour into Galfredik, faster than he could control. He couldn't pull away. The inheritance ritual had commenced. Under the ritual of blood, Galfredik's soul and all his powers would pass to the Lord. That was the inheritance. The moment it completed, a surge of energy tore loose. Galfredik screamed as a blinding crimson light shot straight into the sky. Fire erupted across the village. The roamer appeared, and began slaughtering everyone in its path. People fled, screamed, and died. From a distance, Lugates watched, and smiled. This was exactly what he had planned. Every sacrifice he had ever offered the labyrinth had been building to this moment. His reward was the roamer itself, unleashed upon the village. The humans had no idea that he and the labyrinth had orchestrated it all. Once their despair reached its peak, Lugates would step in, slay the roamer, and be hailed as their savior. He knew human nature well. The deeper the suffering, the more desperately people cry out for a messiah. He wanted them to suffer. He wanted them to bleed, so that when he arrived to save them, they would worship him. The monsters multiplied. Eutychus stumbled and fell, crying out for his mother. One lunge, jaws wide open, then something stopped it. He seized the creature's mouth, snapped its teeth, and wrenched it apart, finishing the monster where it stood. Eutychus and his mother exhaled with relief. Lugate stared, unable to process what he was seeing. He had offered Eugene to Jan as the final sacrifice. He was supposed to be dead. Eugene met his gaze with cold certainty and asked whether Jevin knew what he had done. The look on Eugene's face said the answer no longer mattered. Then the top of the church caved in. Galfredik stepped through the rubble. Lugates laughed nervously. Galfredik looked at him with quiet disgust and asked if he'd been missed. He extended his vampire nails, a slow smirk spreading across his face.